So I'm recording the session. I guess I should first say I'm Michael Brown, and my thing in the 3D world is lenticular art. I'm recording the session because I actually moderate a Facebook group called Lenticular Art Printing and 3D Photography. We have about 2,000 members, but they're all over the world, so most of them will never have a chance to come to a place like Buffalo. So before I begin, I'm going to take a group selfie. So this has nothing to do with 3D. It's basically a 360 camera, so I can take a picture and view it in binoculars. Look at your feet, look at the ceiling, do all those kind of things. This is about ready to go. There you go. Self-timer, so 5 seconds it counts down. Look at the camera. Thank you. Now that's all you'll have to do the entire.
Oh, that was exhausting.
Yeah. So, the thing I love about lenticular is it's now possible to self-print your own lenticular 3Ds. And the fantastic thing about lenticular is you don't need these glasses, right? It's auto-stereoscopic, so I can take a picture like this and I can show it to someone, no glasses required, they can see it. That's really the beauty of it. It's not a perfect medium, like almost every type of 3D, there's some kind of gotcha with it. And the thing about lenticular, the gotcha is, it's not exactly 3D, I call it 2.5D, right? It has more depth than a piece of paper, but it doesn't have that kind of volumetric depth we get when we look at a stereo viewer. And one of the reasons for that is the way the lenticular optics work. During this presentation, I'm going to pass around a few things, and I have 3 pictures right here, and this one was taken, I had the model, and I had a slide bar, and I slid my camera across, and I took about 50-some frames. I don't remember the exact number. I took 3 of those frames, one here, one here, one here, and I made this print, which you'll look at and pass out. And that one, it's almost like an auto-stereoscopic tablet. You get it just the right angle, and you see crisp 3D, and you see that great depth that we talked about. But it has this clicking effect, like you move it, and all of a sudden the image kind of jumps. So the more modern approach to 3D is actually take that bar, slide the camera, and use more than 3 pictures, use a lot of pictures. And then you get a result like this, where you can wiggle it around and it doesn't jump at you. But the drawback to that is you have less depth of field. So the subject's sharp, but the background might go out of focus. So 3D lenticular is possible, it's good, but it has these different limitations. Now, where we are today in 2023, from a software perspective, there's never been a better time. There's commercial off-the-shelf software you can use to get your 3D pictures made into lenticular. And the good news is free software as well. So there's software called SuperFlip, which has been available for 20 years. And it's free, and it will allow you to interlace your pictures to make a 3D lenticular. And there's new software called Grape, which was written by Yitzhak Weissman in Israel. That's also free, and it's very modern. You can use that on the PC, you can use it on the Macintosh. So software, there's never been a better time to be involved in lenticular. From a lens perspective, it's almost a terrible time. We used to have a great manufacturer in the United States called Microlens in North Carolina. And they made these types of lenticular sheets, and you could order them from Microlens in small quantities. They'd ship them UPS right to your home in a matter of a few days. They closed down just before COVID. And there was another US manufacturer named Packer, and they closed down last summer. So if you want to get lenticular sheets now in the United States, the best thing to do is go on to eBay or Etsy and do a search on lenticular sheets. And there are people that will buy a skid of them from China, and then they'll coat them with the adhesive and cut it down to size, and then you can get the material that way. There's a US company called View Through. They also provide small sheets of lenticular. Now, if you are actually looking for additional sources, if you ever go to that Facebook group I mentioned, I have a list of a dozen different sources for lenticular sheets you can get. But it's harder to get the sheets now than it was even a few years ago. So software and hardware. One new development is there's a company in China, and they're now making this thin film lenticular. And probably a few years ago, you probably remember some of the auto-stereoscopic tablets would have a lenticular surface on it, so they would get material from a company called KDX, and they would actually coat the tablet with a thin film. Well, what these companies are doing now is they're making this thin film material, and then what you actually do is you mount this film to a sheet of acrylic plexiglass, and then once this lens pattern is on the acrylic plexiglass, you now have made a lenticular sheet. So they can ship you this material. You can see how it rolls and it folds. It can be shipped very inexpensively rather than trying to ship, something like this, which is a really heavy-duty sheet. So this comes in a variety of LPIs, 20 LPI, 40 LPI, and so forth.
How does that compare? Is that a good option for making that?
It's a great option if you want to make big prints. Usually it's coarser LPI, like 20 LPI. The coarser you go with your lenticules line per inch, when I say 20, that would be 20 lenticules per inch versus 40, which would be 40. The lower the number, the coarser the resolution, but the greater the depth. I don't know if those of you can see this little fractal thing. This is, I believe, either 15 or 20, and this little fractal pattern, sticks out like 6 inches off the surface. Whereas if I use something like a 100 LPI sheet, made a business card, maybe you'd have that much depth. It'd still have 3D, but it wouldn't have the...
Is there one difference between these two, or are they just two examples?
It's two examples with a difference. So on the back, if you look, one of them's made with 3 pictures. It has great depth of field, but if you move it ever so slightly, you see the image jump. The other one's made with about 50 pictures. There's no jumpiness, but you have less depth of field. So as a lenticular artist, you almost choose, do you want the greatest sharpness or do you want the greatest smoothness? And you pick, you pick whatever you want.
Was that one you held up, one made with the...
It was not. I haven't tested that material yet. They just shipped that to the hotel.
Oh, wow. So later today.
There you go. So now, I'm going to pass around these two things. I'll start one in each room. This is a 60 LPI micro lens, and I have different parallax values, like 0 parallax and plus value, minus value, and it sort of shows you when you have 0 parallax where everything's flat, you get your greatest sharpness. But as things come forward or recede, you get less sharpness. So typically, I'll test a lenticular sheet and I'll find out, well, maybe I can do, a 4% parallax. I'll pass that one on. This one is interesting. This is using a sheet, like I make a 3D picture. I have 20 frames in here. And what you do is you hold this 10 inches away from your face. You look at it with one eye and you'll see a few numbers. Like right now I see 9, 10, 11, 12. I use the other line, and other eye, and I see 5, 6, 7, 8. So it basically shows you, lenticular is stereoscopic to the extent you use 2 eyes to view it, but it's not stereoscopic as far as creating it. You typically use more frames, and you typically use a wider baseline. So if you would take a normal stereo pair and your camera lenses are about 2.5 inches apart, on a 3D lenticular sheet, you probably want to have 3 times that distance, so you're 9 inches or so. If you're using a wider angle lenticular sheet, referred to as an animation sheet, you probably would have 6 times that linear value. So, let's see, pass these up next. So these 2 images are actually made using an iPhone. So I took the iPhone, they're both with the iPhone. One is putting the iPhone on a slider and sliding across, taking a series of frames, take 30 pictures. And the second is using the iPhone in portrait mode where you get a depth map. So these days, software like 3D Master Kit will allow you to take a 2D picture and its corresponding depth map, generate a series of frames, and those frames can be used to make the lenticular print. So the one that says 30 frames, you can actually kind of rotate that and get that look around effect. The one made with the depth map, it's 3D, but it's almost like those embossed maps. You can't have occlusions and things. So I pass those out, you can just look at one versus the other. And then finally, this piece here, this was actually done with a drone. Okay, so it's looking straight down. We hold it this way, it's flat like a regular photo. You hold it that way, you see it in 3 dimensions.
Hello, I'm Michael, sir. That's on the side. I got some samples if you want them.
That would be great, and we'll do that. I'm almost done.
Sure.
Go through samples. So then I talked about 3D lenses and animation lenses. A 3D lenticular sheet typically has a viewing angle of about 25 degrees, and an animation sheet typically has a viewing angle of about 50 degrees. So this is a 3D series, picture on a 3D lens, picture on an animation lens, and what you find out is the animation lens doesn't have as much depth.
How many frames is this one?
That's a good question. I really don't know, but it would be in the dozens, probably 50 or so.
You turn it sideways, you sometimes can count.
If you have the patience.
So, thanks to Peter Sinclair, actually, he put me in touch with a guy named Alan Lowe. And Peter's done a lot of work with Alan. Alan Lowe is the Lowe in the NIMS-Lowe camera, Alan's camera. And so we've been corresponding. He's been sending me some things. And this binder is all material he sent me. On the cover of this is actually a 4-lens camera, 110, that he made years ago. This is probably the 1980s. And it even has a little PC socket for flash sync. I mean, that's really incredible. So he sent me some pretty intriguing samples that I want to pass around. His 3D philosophy, I think, is a little different than mine. So this is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it's transparency. You want to hold it up to the light. But he really, after the NIMS-Lowe, went to the idea of taking 3 lenses because he wanted that greater sharpness. So these have incredible resolution, great Dmax, maximum density, great sharpness, but they have that sort of jitter effect. Now this one here, there's been a little damage to it. This is actually a Cibachrome. And so the lenticular material in these cases, somewhere between 150 and 250 lines per inch. So he can hold just incredible detail in this imagery. So he's using this lens material he refers to as nanotechnology. And I'm going to give each of you a pack of this. In fact, I'll start it this way. Each of you just take one of those. And those are some samples of his very fine lens nanotechnology. And he's at a point right now where he's actually taken that fine material and he's putting it, or will put it, on phones and tablets. And he hopes to introduce that next year. And at the SIG tomorrow, I brought one of his 3D phones that he just shipped over. And he wrote, he said, "Oh, this is the best 3D you've ever seen." Well, as everyone in this room, we've all seen a lot of great 3D, right? So I have to say, that's pretty amazing on the phone.
And it's not lenticular, or it is?
It is lenticular, yeah. So it's almost,
Did he send you the actual phone?
yeah. Again,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Don't let me get my
All right, well, maybe I'll just turn it on and pass it over.
Yeah.
Don't do anyone walk over.
Don't walk
So
off.
potentially we could take any tablet or any phone, put this material on there, and we can create our own, or
Because they have to do that in the manufacturing process. You want, obviously, a clean room environment, the correct registration, everything. All right, so Peter, while I'm booting this up, why don't you show some of your samples?
I had a long association. Well, that sounds a bit arrogant, but I know Alan Lowe for about 20 years off and on. And this actually has nothing to do with Alan Lowe, but it's lenticulars I'm making lately with a new printer, and I'm using the layering system as opposed to the grayscale map system. So this one was Google Earth picture, and this is a conversion from an old hockey flat photo. So I'll just pass those around for people to look at.
That's 2 images or 3?
I'm sorry?
2 images and then pictures?
Oh, there's about 16 separate images. So layering means you cut his head out, you move it to his body 16 times, kind of thing.
you're doing that with software or manually, or you took 16 images?
Mostly manually, in the sense that I get all my layers organized, get them all stacked, right? And then just start doing the little mini shifts, sort of like the old way that, I can't remember the guy, he introduced it. Anyway, I learned it 20 years ago to do that, and then it's very time consuming. But there is ways to semi-automate it. You just, once you've done a head to a shoulder, you don't need to think of the background anymore. You work your way through the picture.
All right, so this device does not have eye tracking on it, so it's typical of a stereoscope. I think you want to put it at the right angle. I have pictures on here that I've taken. You just go left to right to scroll through. Yes, I have no idea what LPI that is. It's, you can't view it with the naked eye. I've never measured it, but it's really, to me, has the highest resolution I've ever seen. Linda, I know you are kind of an expert on 3D phones. It'd be interesting to get your assessment when you see it, because I have nothing to compare it to.
Boy, there's great extinction of these.
Yeah, so with that, that's pretty much what I had, but I'm open to answer any questions people might have on the topic of lenticular.
Oh, is the 3D effect only horizontal landscape or?
Currently, yeah, and you've talked about that a bit. There are ways of angling the screen when you put it on, but right now, the sample I have seen is horizontal only. And the phone actually has a camera on it with two lenses. Not the great distance we think about, it's fairly short. But I was impressed when I took a picture of it. I thought it was pretty impressive. I actually think auto stereoscopy, whether it's a print or a tablet or a phone, is really the huge advance for lenticular, because we're all into this and willing to put up with the compromises of glasses and viewers and all those things. But if you want to share these things with the general public or mere mortals, they don't want to go through the gyrations that we go through.
Now, does this process work with just a left and right image, or do you need multiple images later to get the full effect?
For the print or the phone?
No, I'm on the prints, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes.
I changed directions.
Okay, so the prints, you can take a stereo pair, make a lenticular print, but it's almost going to be like a tablet. You have to hold it at a certain distance, at a certain angle, and when you do that, it's going to have great volume. Okay, but if you want to treat it like a photo, just hand it to someone and say, hey, look and see this in 3D. They're not going to get that. It's just going to be confusing. So
There's only one sweet spot.
yes, and it's very narrow and very precise. But if you put in multiple frames, that becomes something they call a parallax panoramagram, where the multiple images, and then that gives you degrees of freedom in your viewing position and distance. Okay, and so typically for prints, you want more than two. Generally, when I do them, I'm doing 30, 50, something like that. Yes?
50 increments?
50 photographs.
Yeah.
Let's say I was going to do a portrait in this room, I'd have a 1 meter slider, I'd slide my camera or phone across it. I would probably take, a stereo base that ended up being about, 12 to 15 inches, and using those to make the lenticular print.
And that free software you talked about will handle 50 images?
Yep. Yeah.
Could you give the names again of the two softwares you mentioned?
Yes, the most modern free software is Grape, just like the fruit. Okay, written by Yitzhak Weissman. It's available for Mac or PC. You can just download it. He also has software called F-Pitch, which allows you to do a pitch test of your lenticular sheet to find out the correct pitch for a given viewing distance. The other one is Superflip. If you go to that Facebook group, Lenticular Art, Printing, and 3D Photography, you can download Superflip right there. It's also, the group's also a great resource because people like Yitzhak, Jake Purchase in the UK, I have probably a half dozen experts who can answer any questions for beginners if they're having issues with printers or lenses or things of that nature.
So, repeat that again. Talk about this group.
The two software programs?
No. About the
Facebook group? Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, the Facebook.
It's a Facebook group.
Okay.
Lenticular Art, Printing, and 3D Photography.
You don't have any handouts for some of these?
I should. If I was on the wall, I would.
You could post a document to the website.
Yes, and I think I will do that.
So once you get your 30, 40 images sliced up, print out the image, how do you get the film applied to it in online properly?
Great question. So usually, this sheet already has a background, right? You've seen that, but you buy these sheets with adhesive pre-applied, and that adhesive is pressure sensitive. And so typically what you do is, I'll take a sheet, it'll be clear, I'll take a razor knife, I'll take off the top quarter edge of the release liner, and then I line my print up with that, having a piece of silicone paper so it doesn't stick. Some people just have a paper roll off the table. You line that up, and then you tack it in place and then run that through a roller laminator.
So it's eyeball manual.
Yeah, in fact, all the software prints a registration border around the print. And so this one's actually not lined up perfectly, but when you're viewing it straight on, you should have a black border all the way around the perimeter, and that means you're within registration. And when you see that, that's the point where you tack that in place. Yeah. If you want to get started with lenticular, to me, the best thing to do is buy a looking glass portrait, because there you can experiment with taking multiple pictures. It does the interlacing software, and you can still get that look-around effect. And that, if you decide at that point, oh, lenticular is for me, and you want to go to the print process, you know, you have a head start because you've already learned about taking the multiple pictures, what works, what doesn't work. So the looking glass portrait is like a digital lenticular.
So how many companies are still making material?
A handful of companies, but primarily in China. In the United States, there's a firm called Spartech, and their extrusion line is from Wisconsin. And they will make lenticular for you, but you have to order it in skid load quantities. And Microlens had these cylinders to make these great 3D and animation lenses, and those cylinders are currently at Spartech, or they were within the past year, but they were denied permission for Microlens to use them to make any material. So if you wanted to make a modern 3D lenticular sheet these days, you'd have to have a cylinder engraved, and that's about a $60,000 deal. And then you'd have to do a production run with between 5,000 and 10,000 pounds of plastic, and that's about a $10,000 deal. And that's why I'm not making my own lenticular lenses. It's a real niche market. I think we're probably at a point now where people will import lenses from China, put the adhesive on, and then sell it in small quantities to interested people.
Are these strictly reflective, or could they be backlit?
They can be backlit. Yeah. Everything I have here is on a piece of white polyester film, so it's reflective. But when I make one of these, if I wanted, I could rip that backer off, and the inkjet receiving layer that's on the surface stays stuck to the adhesive, and then you end up with a transparency. Yeah, or you could just buy transparency material.
Passed around transparency earlier.
The transparency I passed around early, those Allen Lowe ones, those are photographic. Right? I should mention that. Everything I'm doing currently is with inkjet. Unfortunately, photography and those materials are like an endangered species. So the high-resolution digital recorders really aren't made anymore for the most part. There are a few exceptions. And the materials really are rarer and rarer. I mean, you can continually hear Kodak discontinuing, display materials or certain emulsions, things like that. Let's see, other questions? So when you have that phone, you can swipe to get to the previous or next picture if you want.
It's amazing. It's very good. Very good.
It is good, right?
The resolution is good.
Yeah. So again, it's that nanotechnology that he's putting on display devices.
Still, yeah, very narrow sweet spot, but it's still amazing.
Well, he's talking on the tablet of having the tracking, so that would widen the sweet spot. My understanding is he wants to launch this at the Consumer Electronics Show, which is January. So this thing and the tablets are available. They're engineering prototypes. I mean, you have to accept them for what they are. But I think it's promising.
The adhesive put on any phone, or has to?
You would buy a phone with it. I mean, in my dream world, that tech would be sold to Apple, so every iPhone would have it, because that would make 3D popular.
And linking to a printing service, get this thing printed. You just looked at it, get a print sent for 96 cents would be great.
I don't think anything like that will happen.
Yeah, I'm really dreaming.
And what about printing services? Are there any?
Well, years ago there was. In Georgia, the Ninflow was going to break down.
Well, you're Snap 3D. Why don't you tell your history with that?
You're not doing that anymore?
No, I'm phasing out. I'm having difficulty finding printing myself. It's costly because, ironically, I have to do all my own artistry, picking focal point, blah, blah, and if it fails, oh, that should have been further forward. They don't help you in any artistry, so I'm burning time to get a good print look. And then when I get it, I don't really have a market. I don't have a good website. I do it for my own amusement mainly, and the sheets you gotta get to justify a mailing is lots, like 200 sheets. So I'm kind of leaning, in my perfect world would be a nice 28-inch monitor doing left and right, side tracking, boom, and under $1,000, you know, and then just run pictures on it and skip printing altogether.
Did all of you take one of those packets of those samples?
No, are we supposed to hang them out?
Yeah, everyone's supposed to take one.
So how many pictures do you think you use these for the photo?
That currently has 2 pictures, a stereo pair,
Only 2.
but he's talking about another possibility is to do a 9 view if you wanted a wider viewing area. It's on here.
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right. Just take one. Next one.
Thank you.
The one I'd like is the Niagara Falls one, if someone would say that one.
Yeah, I saw the Niagara Falls on one of them. That's your picture, right?
Yeah, winter, summer, I have one, yeah.
Just take one.
Don't take them, they just go ahead, you know.
So what are you telling us? Don't get a movie set now, wait till January.
I don't know what I'm telling you. Like all this technology, there's all these possibilities. What really comes to market? How does it work?
Thanks very much.
Some of them are.
That's it, beautiful.
What's that? Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did one exactly like that. And because I
The idea is almost the same.
sent a picture
You know, you
back.
take the slider, move it across, but as the slider's moving, the model does something. You know, so you can combine 3D and motion. There's also
So this phone is not some J3 DS, JS3D, right?
JS3D.
Yeah. I think they're the ones who made the Sky tablet Pro on
Oh, it's something like this. This is something.
They also have a phone that hasn't launched there.
Yeah. This is so. I'll answer your question. I don't know exactly. What I do know is Alan Lowe and another scientist came up with this nano optic that they're putting on the phone. They're working right now to bring it to market. So is it
Have you ever done
different
anything
than
with intergrams?
What's that?
Have you ever done anything with intergrams, fly's eyes images?
I never. The lenticular is, you know, crazy enough. The fly's eye, now you have even a narrower sweet spot, of course, lenses. Quite frankly, I've never been impressed with the fly's eye I've seen.
Yeah. Apparently, I was an engineer at work on that project.
I wrestled the guy to the ground, I took a step.
Okay.
And we didn't see it on this side.
Is this an Android phone?
It is, yeah. I'll figure it out.
You have a problem, but I have to ask you about this.
Yeah.
Completely out of my
So, there you go. So you can swipe.
Yeah, bad choice of words. Bad choice of words, swipe.
He wants to swipe your phone.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're right, that was the wrong
for
one.
steal, don't swipe the book.
Slide.
You can swish. Slide your finger. Oh, that's fun. So, any other questions? You're all welcome to come up and look at any of this material here.
So you try to create images to sell like in souvenir shops? I mean, like Niagara Falls. Are you able to do those?
You did Niagara Falls, right?
I got even in Niagara Falls with a 4x6 postcard. It was taken from the ground, not that one, but the exact idea: summer, winter, and a 4-image montage from ground shots of the railing and the stall, blah blah blah. Looked lovely, da da da. I sold it to them for about $2.50 Canadian. They sold it for $8 or something. And the gift shop, and they only ordered one bunch of 200 runs. So I got an order, but it only went one run. And it was explained to me by the woman running the gift shop, because I kept thinking about all this. I brought one of my beautiful wooden frame, gorgeous, and all they said was, "This is lovely, take it to an art shop. We deal in plastic mountings, garbage stuff." She even said herself, garbage, which they can get at 10 times markup. 2 cents to 60 cents. They make money with the garbage.
Yeah, a lot of those lenticular trinkets are brought in by the shipping container.
Yeah, and they do have, bookmarks and
Yeah.
things.
Actually, I sell mine at art shows around the country, so that's what I do. Typically, a small one I sell for $99. A big one that size I sell for like
And whenever I go to one of the state parks, I'm always thinking, geez, you would be able to sell, you should be able to sell something, right? I mean, even if it's selling some anaglyphs with some cheap glasses or selling, you sell one, but then you have a link to images that you can view online or something. There has to be an opportunity.
That's a long,
Maybe not to
long
become
trail. That
really,
doesn't have any people.
but you don't see this stuff around.
These are the
Enthusiasts.
lenticular enthusiasts. Yeah, they're great on Washington.
Are these one of the 3 images?
I'm trying to do, where my big interest is hockey and sports, I put that hockey picture. I haven't done a little bookmark. Is it big mass? How difficult 30 cents to play around and try? That's sort of what I would aim at.
That's a difficult question to answer.
Okay,
right?
okay.
But I
Sell
learned,
at the Stanley Cup.
it was 18 years ago, so you
Well,
basically
just in the
get some
hockey
software,
hall
there's
thing.
demo software,
Nice.
free
How the
software.
heck do I?
You get some lenses from Amazon or Etsy.
Okay.
You already have a computer, you already have the ability to take pictures.
Right.
They wanted to get the
Peter
paper
messed it up already.
Peter broke it.
It's probably gotten figured against me, he doesn't want to.
These are testers.
Yeah. Toddler proof. Peter broke it.
And then,
Thanks.
so most of those are stereo pairs I did with either the two Sony cameras or,
Oh, you put yours to work on.
yeah, these are all mine.
Oh, wonderful.
The drone is the area.
Okay, so with just 2 pictures,
But 2 pictures, the best thing to do is take one picture, generate a depth map, take that picture and depth map into 3D and generate the frames.
Okay. Okay, but
No, for lenticular prints. For this, just throw 2
But that's
pictures in.
just their 2 pictures.
now as far as a printer, do you need a high resolution?
We need like an Epson photo quality printer.
Okay. That guy looks like me and
That's right.
Okay.
Join the Facebook group.
Okay.
That's the fact.
I have about 60 right
Well, I want the.
my walls, and people always stop and appreciate them, the girls, they appreciate them much more than they do the other images. It's really funny. Pretty.
Turn the phone on. Back to me, I'm trying to like you have to be. There's a picture.
I have a question about 2 of the prints that I'm not familiar with, but they're 2 of the same image.
Oh yeah.
There's one in a black dress. Anyhow, one of them had more.
Probably wider angle. I think it's talking about.
Yeah, I think. I mean, these
So I have a question for you.
might have the same effect, but it's not as obvious.
This is, no, these are the same narrow angles.
Like, I would
Oh,
like
okay.
to get
Because I mean, yeah, this one.
This is a narrow angle. Particular sheet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I see. Because this one, I can view it from.
like,
So this one.